Welcome to Larking Gowen Insights, accountancy and business advice for all, a series that gives you bite-sized tips and guidance on tax, funding, legislation, reforms and much more. With case studies, business advisory and sector specials and even interviews, our team of experts are committed to helping you navigate the world of accounting and finance with a variety of presenters from across our specialisms. So, let's get on with today's show.
Hello, I am Julia White. I'm a manager based in our business and private team in the southern regions. I'm here today with my colleague Martin Sanders, who's a manager in our North Norfolk offices. Hello, Martin.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, all right. I'm a bit croaky, got a bit of a cold, but so apologies for my voice.
No problem at all. So we're here today to talk about the tourism and leisure industry. We both sit on the specialism that we have within Larking Gowen, and we're here to discuss the challenges that we're seeing from our clients and across the sector.
Yep, multiple challenges from various different aspects of clients' businesses. It doesn't seem to be that they can get a break at the moment, does it?
No, not at all. It's another curveball after the other at the moment, isn't it?
Seems to have been like that for the last however many years since COVID. So that's almost 3 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we're sort of heading our way out of the pandemic, and then of course the cost of living crisis is hit, which is having a real impact on our clients across the sector, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's multi facets to it, isn't there? It's not just one area, and some of the areas that we're going to touch on, it's staffing, it's energy, it's general inflation and prices to materials and stuff like that. There's no break anywhere. And we also talked about previously during the pandemic we had reduced VAT rates for the tourism and leisure and hospitality sector, which the many businesses benefited from, but they've now since returned to 20% at the standard rate.
Yeah, exactly. So let's kick it off then with the cost of living. So this is obviously a huge topic at the moment with so many elements to it, but one of the things that we're seeing a lot from our clients is the impact of the increased electricity rates.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I recently did a blog on this where I talked about some of the things that client and impact that it was having on certain clients, and it's not certain clients, it's almost all clients that are seeing their electricity prices increase. And the case study that I used was that a client had found that their electricity bill had gone from £8,000 a month to £32,000 a month, which is just ludicrous, really.
Astronomical difference, isn't it?
And in that kind of a business that's had an original cost of £8,000 a month is clearly not a small business. It's a decent sized business, and speaking to the owner, they felt that they had no choice. What options did they have other than to pay the bills, because shutting the doors wasn't going to help. So they had to pay the bills that they were being presented with. Rather interestingly, when they challenged their supplier on what they could do, their supplier, and what the supplier was expecting to happen to people in the industry, the supplier just simply said, well, we expect people won't be able to pay the bills and they'll go bust, which wasn't the most helpful of advice I think I've ever heard.
No, and I think that's it, isn't it? Just touching on the size of the companies, it's not just smaller businesses that are really feeling the pinch. It is across the board. Like you say there, that must be a sizable business in itself, and everybody is going to feel the pinch from these electricity rates. And I guess it goes back to trying to find little things that you can do to help bring your electricity usage down. Things that perhaps were taken for granted before, like maybe leaving some lighting on, so when guests arrive at hotels, they come into a nice sort of ambience and setting. But perhaps maybe sort of looking back over that and thinking, is it necessary? How much is that costing? How much usage is that taking up?
And in talking to clients, I've certainly seen some that have really looked at the ways that that they're operating their business to see where they can actually cut back on that electricity, and whether that be, reduced opening hours, reduced opening days, to try and condense their usage of the electricity and condense their business into the time when they're using the electricity, to try and reduce their overhead costs. We've all seen the stories in the newspapers of people in pubs and lighting candles and things like that, and going back to those days. And unfortunately, it is having that impact on people. At the smaller end of businesses, there's people that are having to take second jobs on top of running their own business to help pay for their electricity costs, which is, clearly not a good place to be. And unfortunately for the industry, where people are coming to the end of leases, we're also seeing people almost scared to sign up for new leases for what has been thriving businesses, because of the impact of the future electricity costs. So it certainly is a worrying time for them.
Absolutely, and I think electricity is just one aspect, isn't it, of all the rising costs that these businesses are facing. I mean, with inflation at it's 10.1%, I mean, that's an astronomical increase again, and that again is having an impact on staffing, because I see a lot of businesses that are trying to increase staff wages to a point, not quite by 10.1%, but in a bid to try and retain those staff. But of course, that's just having a hit on their bottom line as well.
So we in our personal lives, we're seeing our costs rising, aren't we? We know what's happened to fuel prices. We've got electricity increases at home as well, and we know going to the shops and things like that, there's additional costs, and those pressures are all coming on the staff members, and business owners are really in a rock and a hard place, because they're trying their best to help their staff members whilst being faced with all these pressures from elsewhere, on their costs and their overheads and their direct costs. And it's a real tough balancing act, and it's just purely eating away at the profit margin that they can achieve on their business.
And it comes back to even considering where your staff are travelling in from. I've had businesses talk about how they've been trying to encourage lift share apps to try and reduce the fuel costs that their staff are facing, because some people, it's becoming a thought whether it's actually beneficial or not to travel into the job that they currently have, because of the cost of the fuel prices. So again, it's sort of trying to ease the pressures on the staff members, but of course that is just coming back to the bottom line for the business.
Yeah, and the flip side is, since the pandemic in particular, many businesses have certain staff who work at home if they're not in an industry where they need to work at the premises. And will some of those people now come back to working at businesses because the business is covering the electricity costs and heating costs that they wouldn't have to cover at home if they, to save them personally. So, there is that side of things as well. I think it's such a difficult position for everybody to be in with all the costs that are increasing. But we have seen, people have invested in technology that's more energy efficient, to try and reduce those costs and what they need, investing in things like solar panels, and green technologies in order to reduce their requirements of pulling from the grid to try and keep their charges down. So there are options for those that are able to go out and invest and have the capital to do so.
Yes, exactly, and it comes back to that, doesn't it? If they've got the capital to be able to do it, then great. But for those businesses that might not, it's an increasingly tough time for them.
Yeah, and those that haven't, they're also linked to what we're talking about here. Interest rates have increased significantly over the past few months. So those that haven't got the cash available to go and invest, that historically may have been able to make investments by going out and borrowing, the cost of borrowing is going up as well. So there's another impact on them, that every way they turn, what was where they looked before is looking at a more expensive option.
Yeah, exactly. So, Martin, we're sort of heading out of the pandemic to a point. I mean, as we head into the winter months, we are going to see a rise in cases, but thankfully, it still seems to be a fairly mild case. So, unlike last year, we saw lots of businesses having to turn away Christmas parties. Lots of Christmas parties got cancelled, and that had a real impact on the tourism and leisure clients that we've seen, and the money that they and the revenue that they lost from having to do so. Hopefully that won't be such a problem this year, and they'll still be able to hold these events, but I'm still seeing businesses impacted by COVID, but not quite in the same way. So from people that I've been speaking to, particularly sort of restaurants, they're seeing that bookings are being cancelled same day, last minute, and the reason being illness, being COVID. And there's not really a lot that the owners can do about that because of COVID. So they're losing money there and revenue, but they're also, I mean, that table may have been booked for a week or so, and they've geared up to serve a party of maybe 10, 12 people that have now called off last minute. And that's another area that the businesses are going to have to overcome with COVID. Are you seeing much about that?
Yeah, the same kind of things. We've had COVID first reared its head in early 2020, didn't it? And we're now in November 22, so we're almost 3 years on since it first, we first became aware of it. And COVID, under its various different guises, is continuing to affect businesses today. Clearly initially we had the lockdowns, and everybody had to shut, which was the hard impact of the COVID. But since then, like you just mentioned previously, people are having to restrict table numbers and table service only and things like that. And as we've come out of the other side, you'd think COVID could be behind us, but actually in different ways it's still affecting many businesses, and like you say, maybe some people are using it as an excuse to, if they don't want to turn up to a restaurant, the easy option is to say, "Oh, somebody's got COVID." Many businesses that we have dealt with and we've seen, have potentially started to try and take deposits from larger groups in order to try and avert the costs that they incur. Because, as you say, if you've got a large table booking for the weekend, and you're running a decent sized menu, you're buying in additional products and you're staffing up ready for that table and how busy you're going to be at the weekend, say, and when they don't turn up, you've incurred those additional costs and not received the income from it. So it is incredibly difficult, and I think we're going to be seeing the effects of COVID under different guises for many years to come. We all know people that are, everyone that seems to go on holiday seems to come back, and somebody from the group seems to have COVID. Like I say, we talked before the beginning of this, and I've just been away to Disneyland with my family, and come back and haven't been very well this week, and I haven't tested positive for COVID. But the first thought is that what it is, and that seems to be what's happening to people.
Yeah, and also, I guess, when people are going away and people aren't testing like we were this time last year, and so people just do assume that it's COVID, perhaps maybe without testing, and so again they're calling up, they're cancelling based on the fact that they don't feel very well and think it's COVID, but maybe it's not. So I think, how long does that go on for? I don't know, as much as COVID is going to be a thing for people, but I think what we'll see more and more of is places taking non-refundable deposits. But again, that really depends on who your targeted customers are, I suppose, doesn't it? Whether your business can handle taking and introducing those non-refundable deposits, but definitely for the sort of premium end restaurants that are having cancellations last minute, it is having an impact on their costs.
And at a time when their costs are the highest they've probably ever been as well. So it's incredibly difficult for everybody out there, and it's not just restaurants, is it? We've got hotels, we've got pubs, there's attractions with people. People are more and more used to booking in advance before turning up and doing anything really as a result of COVID. The days it seems of turn up anywhere without booking, even if it's a day out with, like I say, a day out with the family. You tend to pre-book nowadays, just because of that's what we got used to due to COVID. And that must help, and it does help a lot of businesses plan for who they've got coming that day. But clearly, if that doesn't transpire to turn out to be the case, then that can have a significant impact.
Yeah, definitely. I know we touched on earlier how it just seems to be one thing after the other for tourism businesses at the moment. And one thing that I'm going to mention is the VAT. The VAT has gone back up to 20%. Obviously, we had reduced rates for some time because of COVID. So it went down to 5% and then 12.5%, but now back at the usual rate of 20%, which again has had quite the impact on the tourism businesses.
And that 5%, there's been a campaign for a number of years that the rate on tourism, leisure and hospitality activity should be significantly lower than the standard 20%. The rate that we have in our country is higher than a lot of our neighbours, and it puts us at a disadvantage. Yeah, so clearly the differing rates have a significant impact for businesses. If you're selling a product at say £12 at standard rates of VAT, £2 of that £12 is going over to the VAT man. Down at 5%, only 57p goes across to the VAT man, and at the 12.5% in the middle, around £1.33 goes across to the VAT man. So during the pandemic, the businesses benefited from that VAT rate because they didn't reduce their prices as a result of it, but they were able to keep hold of that additional VAT that wasn't going across to HMRC. But considering where we've come, that I felt at the time, having had conversations with clients, that was a benefit for the businesses to help them through the pandemic. But clearly coming out of the other side, where they've had to return their VAT rate back up to the standard rate of 20%, then that is having an impact on what they're able to trade for going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like through COVID there was a lot of help for them. I know it was still a difficult time, but I think they had grants and they had the VAT, and yet we're still in a difficult time for them. But there doesn't seem to be much let up, any relief for them to help businesses through this difficult time. So yeah, it does just feel like one thing after the other at the moment. So hopefully going forward we'll start to see maybe a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel for them, and we can start growing. They can start growing their businesses again.
And there are some grants out there being operated by local councils and similar that businesses can apply for, but it's nothing like the assistance that was given during COVID, which clearly couldn't continue at the rate it was from the country's point of view. But there are some grants out there that we're aware of, and we'd be happy to let people know about those if they wanted further information.
I think that's probably enough yabbering on from us for now, isn't it, Martin? But like we say, if you've got any questions or you'd like to know more, then our contact details will be in the show notes, so do get in contact with us.
Thank you for joining us for Larking Gowen Insights, Accountancy and Business Advice for All. Don't forget, you can find more information about today's topic and more about how our team of experts can help you in your business by visiting our website larking-gowen.co.uk. Join us again next time for another fascinating insight into the world of accounting and finance.